today we have reached Exodus chapter 15. Of course, the previous chapter, the last thing it says, the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. And then we read this: Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted, both horse and driver he has hurled into the sea. The significance of this is that here we see salvation comes to the Israelites, and they finally see the back of the Egyptians. And Exodus 15, this chapter opens with a moment unlike any other in Scripture. After the Red Sea closed behind them and they stepped onto safe ground, something rose up in the hearts of God's people, a song. This wasn't planned. No one had passed out the lyrics. No one had signaled the choir. The song erupted the moment salvation became real to them. They had just witnessed the amazing power and presence of God, and it was probably a night scene like now, in a majestic way they'd never seen before. They watched walls of water stand upright. They watched their enemies defeated by the hand of God alone. And as they soon caught their breath, they began to sing. Campbell Morgan says there are moods of the soul that can only be expressed in poetry, in music. God delights in those moments when praise comes unforced, those moments where the heart is so full of words alone aren't enough. That's why Scripture calls this a new song, just like in Psalm 40, verse 3, where David says God has put a new song into his mouth after delivering. Charles Spurgeon even notes this is the very first sacred song in the Bible and one of the greatest, and simply because it was fresh from the deliverance from the Egyptians. Secondly, Moses begins with song, I will sing to the Lord. As a foundational truth about worship, the audience is God, not the people around. When Israel sang that day, they weren't performing for each other. They weren't trying to impress or harmonize. They were declaring who God was and what he had done. Spurgeon points out that David later quoted the first verse of this song multiple times in the Psalms, almost word for word. We might ask the question why, and the simple answer: because he understood this same truth, that worship begins with God, centers on God, and returns to God. Thirdly, singing helps us to remember what God has done. The heart of the song is this line: the horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. They sang because of what God did for Israel and what they could never do on their own. Their song became a memorial, a way of planting God's victory deep into their memory and identity. And throughout the Bible, God uses singing to help his people remember. Remember, the book of Psalms, whilst they are Psalms, they were sung and they were memorized by the people. Miriam takes a tambourine and leads Israel's worship, Israel's women in song after Moses' song. Deborah sings after God gives Israel victory over Sisera. David sings after God delivers him from Saul. The early church sings in prison, in suffering, and in celebration. Singing isn't just a decoration in the life of faith, it is declaration. Songs anchor truth in the heart, they rehearse God's victory, and they train our emotions to trust. And they also unite God's people in singing one voice of gratitude. In our own walk with God, we often experience moments, big or small, where his salvation becomes real again. Maybe it's a prayer answered, a door opened, a burden lifted, a fear conquered, a sin forgiven. And in those moments, something in our soul wants to sing, even if quietly, even if imperfectly. The Bible repeatedly commands God's people to sing. Sing to the Lord a new song, sing praises to his name, Sing and make melody in your heart to the Lord. Why? Because singing is one of those ways in which our hearts keep in step with God's work in our lives. Like Israel, you may have just come through your own Red Sea, a season where God carried you through something impossible, or maybe you're still standing at the water's edge, waiting for God to move. Either way, the invitation is, let your heart sing. And in fact, if you're quiet, even the birds sing. Thank you for listening.